The wind howled across the ice planet like a living thing that wanted to kill. Hannah stood at the window of her small research station and watched the snow blow sideways across the frozen ground. She had been alone on Vero 7 for 3 weeks now, and she was supposed to leave yesterday. But the supply shuttle never came. The communication device on her desk crackled with static. The solar storm was still raging above the planet, blocking all signals. No ships could fly through it. No messages could get through. Hannah was stuck here until the storm passed, and nobody knew how long that would take. She looked at the fuel gauge on the wall. The heating system had enough fuel for maybe 3 more days. After that, the temperature inside the station would drop fast. The nights on this planet reached 200 degrees below zero. Nothing lived out there. Nothing could. Hannah was a scientist. She studied alien life forms for the Earth government. This station was supposed to be a safe place to do research, far from the busy colony hub 50 kilometers away. But right now, it felt like the loneliest place in the universe. She made herself a cup of hot tea and sat down at her desk. The work helped keep her mind off the cold that was slowly creeping into the station. Her fingers were already numb at the tips. She pulled her thermal coat tighter around her shoulders. The sensor alarm beeped. Hannah frowned and checked the screen. Something was moving outside, near the thermal vents at the back of the station. That was impossible. Nothing lived on this planet. The survey teams had checked years ago before they built the colony. She grabbed her scanner and went to the back door. Through the small window, she could barely see anything through the blowing snow. But the sensors did not lie. Something was definitely out there. Hannah sealed her environment suit and stepped outside. The cold hit her like a wall, even through the protective gear. The wind tried to push her back inside. She held onto the guide rope and pulled herself toward the thermal vents. That was when she saw them. 5 small creatures huddled together against the vent, trying to soak up any warmth they could find. They were covered in silver fur that looked soft and downy, but it was not enough to protect them from this cold. Their bodies shook violently. Their large eyes watched her with fear and exhaustion. Hannah had never seen anything like them before. They were about the size of cats, with delicate limbs and long tails that wrapped around each other. They made small sounds like birds chirping, but weaker. They were dying. She looked around and saw the crash site in the distance. A ship had gone down maybe 3 kilometers away, half buried in the snow and ice. These creatures must have come from there. But how did they survive long enough to reach her station? One of the small creatures reached out a tiny paw toward her. The movement was slow and weak. It was asking for help in the only way it could. Hannah did not think. She opened her coat and started gathering the creatures carefully. They did not fight her. They were too cold and tired to be afraid anymore. She tucked them against her chest, inside her suit where it was warm. Their bodies felt like ice against her skin. She carried all 5 of them back to the station and sealed the door behind her. The station was not very warm anymore, but it was better than outside. She laid them on her bed and wrapped them in her thermal blankets. They curled together immediately, seeking each other's warmth. Hannah checked her supplies. She had emergency rations, water, and medical equipment. But she had no idea what these creatures needed. She did not know what they ate or how to care for them. She did not even know what they were. She tried the communication system again, hoping the storm had cleared. Static, nothing but static. She was alone with 5 dying alien children and no way to call for help. The creatures made soft sounds on the bed. Hannah sat down next to them and gently touched one of them. Its fur was incredibly soft, and she could feel its tiny heart beating too fast. It was terrified. She started searching through the station's database for any information about crashed ships or alien species in the area. After an hour, she found something. A transport vessel carrying refugees had been scheduled to pass through this system 2 days ago. The refugees were called Valkyrie. Their home planet had been destroyed when their sun collapsed. They were being taken to a new world where they could start over. The ship must have been caught in the solar storm and crashed. These 5 small creatures were children separated from their families. And somewhere out there in that frozen wasteland, Their parents might still be alive, trapped in the wreckage, unable to reach their babies. Hannah looked at the fuel gauge again. 2.5 days now. The heating system was working hard to keep the station warm, burning through fuel faster because of the damaged insulation from the storm. She looked at the 5 small Valkyrie curled on her bed. They had stopped shaking as much. Their breathing was a little steadier. They were warming up slowly. Hannah made her decision. She would keep them alive. She would use whatever fuel she had, whatever food she had, whatever warmth she could give. These children had already lost their world. They had survived a crash. They had crawled through the killing, cold to find help. She would not let them die now. She pulled a chair next to the bed and sat down to watch over them through the night. Outside, the wind screamed and the temperature dropped lower. But inside, 5 small lives continued breathing, and 1 human woman made a promise she intended to keep. The heating system died at 3 in the morning. Hannah woke to the sound of silence. The constant hum of the heater had become such normal background noise that its absence was loud. She jumped out of bed and ran to the control panel. The fuel gauge showed empty. Somehow they had burned through everything faster than she calculated. Maybe there was a leak. Maybe the storm had damaged something. It did not matter now. The heat was gone. The temperature inside the station began to drop immediately. Hannah could see her breath in the air already. She checked the thermometer. 10 degrees and falling. Outside it was nearly 200 below zero. The station walls would hold the cold back for a while, but not forever. She looked at the 5 Valkyrie children still sleeping on her bed, wrapped in every blanket she owned. They were warm for now, but that would not last long. She needed to think. The emergency supply locker held 4 thermal blankets designed for extreme cold. She pulled them all out along with the chemical hand warmers. She had maybe a dozen of those. Each one would stay warm for 6 hours. That gave her 72 hours of warmth if she used them carefully, but 72 hours was 3 days. The storm could last a week or more. The rescue teams could not reach her until it passed. She did not have enough supplies to keep the Valkyrie warm that long. Hannah tried the communication system again. Still nothing but static. She sent out an emergency beacon signal, but she had no way to know if anyone received it. The solar storm was too strong. She went back to the bed and checked on the children. They were starting to stir. Their bodies sensed the temperature change. One of them opened its large eyes and looked at her. It made a small chirping sound. It was afraid. Hannah carefully gathered all 5 of them and brought them to the center of the room where she set up a small nest using all the blankets and thermal sheets. She activated 2 hand warmers and placed them in the nest. The Valkyrie children immediately curled around the warmth. Then she sat down next to them, wrapped in her thermal coat. The coat was military grade, designed to keep soldiers alive in hostile environments. It could maintain body heat for days if necessary, but it only worked for 1 person. The hours passed slowly. The temperature inside the station dropped to 0, then below. Hannah's fingers started to feel numb. Her toes ached with cold. She kept checking on the Valkyrie, making sure they were still breathing. Still warm enough. Around noon, something unexpected happened. The smallest Valkyrie child crawled out of the nest and moved toward Hannah. It climbed onto her lap and pressed itself against her stomach. Then another one followed. Then another. Within minutes, all 5 of them had left their warm nest and were climbing on her, trying to burrow under her coat. Hannah understood. They were seeking her body heat. She was warmer than the hand warmers, warmer than the blankets. She was alive and her body generated heat naturally. To them, she was the best source of warmth available. She carefully opened her coat and let them crawl inside against her skin. They pressed themselves against her chest and stomach, their soft fur tickling her. Then something amazing happened. They began to purr. It was not like a cat's purr. It was deeper, more like a vibration that she could feel through her whole body. The vibration created warmth. They were sharing their thermal energy with her, creating a feedback loop that kept them all warmer together. Hannah realized she needed to stay still. The children were frightened. They had been through trauma. They had lost their world, survived a crash, and been separated from their parents. If she moved too much, they would wake and panic. If they panicked, they would waste energy and get cold again. So she made a decision. She would sit here and keep them warm. She would not move unless absolutely necessary. She would be their safety and their warmth. Until help arrived, she carefully reached for her water bottle and took a small sip. She had 3 bottles left. She would need to ration carefully. She grabbed an emergency ration bar and ate half of it slowly. The Valkyrie children slept against her, their purring creating gentle warmth. The afternoon passed. The temperature dropped to 20 below zero. Hannah's legs started to cramp from sitting still for so long, but she did not move. The Valkyrie needed this. They needed to feel safe. They needed to sleep and conserve their energy. She began to talk to them softly. They could not understand her words, but maybe her voice would comfort them. She told them about Earth, about the seasons, and how winter came every year and covered everything in snow. She told them about how humans survived the cold by staying together, by sharing warmth and food. She told them about spring, when everything came back to life again. As night fell, the station grew even colder. 40 below now. Hannah's body began to feel strange. Her thoughts moved slower. Her fingers would not respond properly when she tried to move them. She recognized the signs. Early hypothermia was setting in. She knew she should get up. She should move around to generate body heat. She should do exercises to keep her blood flowing. But the Valkyrie children were sleeping peacefully against her chest. Their purring was steady and calm. They were warm and safe. If she moved, they would wake. If they woke, they would be afraid. They had been through enough fear already. So Hannah sat still. She pulled her hood up and tucked her hands under her arms. She leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes. The vibration of the Valkyrie purring filled her body like a gentle song. It reminded her that she was not alone. She was keeping something precious alive. The long night continued. The wind howled outside. The temperature kept dropping. But inside her coat, 5 small hearts beat steadily, and 1 human woman refused to give up. Day sat in the communications room at the main colony hub, staring at the screen that showed all the research stations in the area. Most of them glowed green. A few showed yellow for minor issues, but one screen was completely dark. Station 7. Hannah's station. He had been trying to reach her for 2 days. The solar storm made communication difficult, but he should have received something by now. An automated signal. A status update, anything, but there was nothing except silence. Day was an engineer. He fixed things. He solved problems. But he could not fix a problem he could not reach. The storm made travel impossible. Any vehicle that went out in that wind and cold would be torn apart or frozen within minutes. He checked the weather report again. The storm was finally weakening. In another 6 hours, there might be a window. A brief period when the wind died down enough for a rescue rover to make the journey. It was risky, but it was their only chance. Day went to find Bora, the colony's medical officer. She was in the clinic preparing supplies for emergencies. She was always prepared. That was why everyone trusted her. Station 7 is dark, Day said. I am putting together a rescue team. I need you ready in 6 hours. Bora did not ask unnecessary questions. She just nodded and started packing medical equipment into emergency cases. Warming blankets, heating pads, medicine for hypothermia and frostbite, 4 fluids, everything someone would need if they had been trapped in the cold for days while Day and Bora prepared. Another team was working at the crash site. They had found the Valkyrie transport ship half buried in ice 3 kilometers from Station 7. The ship was torn open, its hull cracked like an egg. Most of the crew had not survived, but 3 adult Valkyrie were still alive. They were injured but conscious. Through the translation devices, they told the rescue team about the 5 juvenile Valkyrie who had been separated during the crash. The children had wandered away before the adults could stop them. The adults had tried to follow, but their injuries were too severe. They could not walk through the freezing storm, the adult, Valkyrie made sounds that the translation device described as extreme distress. They were crying for their children. They knew the juveniles could not survive long in the cold. They believed their babies were already dead. The team leader contacted the colony hub and reported the situation. They listened to the message and felt his chest tighten. 5 small alien children lost somewhere in the frozen wasteland. The chances of finding them alive were almost zero, but then he thought about Hannah. Her station was close to the crash site. Only 3 kilometers. If the children had walked in any direction, there was a chance they might have reached her station. A small chance, but a chance. Dade checked the weather radar. The window was opening sooner than expected. He grabbed his cold weather gear and headed for the garage where the rescue rovers were kept. Bora was already there, loading her medical cases into the back of the vehicle. 2 other volunteers joined them. Jinho, a security officer, and Minji, a technician who knew how to repair almost anything. They climbed into the rover and sealed the doors. Day started the engine and checked all the systems. Everything showed green. They drove out of the colony hub and into the storm. Even though it was weakening, the wind still rocked the heavy rover. Snow covered the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. Day drove carefully, following the GPS coordinates toward Station 7. The journey that usually took 30 minutes stretched into 2 hours. The rover struggled through snowdrifts and across ice sheets. Several times they had to stop and dig out the wheels. But Day kept driving. Something told him they needed to hurry. Meanwhile, back at the crash site, the medical team had stabilized the 3 adult Valkyrie enough to move them. They wanted to bring the Valkyrie to the colony hospital, but the aliens refused to leave. They kept making sounds and pointing in the direction their children had gone. They wanted their babies found first. The team leader made a decision. They would take the Valkyrie to Station 7. If by some miracle the children had reached Hannah, the family needed to be reunited. If not, at least the adults would know for certain. They loaded the injured Valkyrie into a medical transport and followed the same route. Day was taking 2 vehicles moving through the storm toward the same destination. Day finally saw Station 7, ahead through the blowing snow. The building looked dark and dead. No lights. No heat signature on the thermal scanner. His heart sank. If the heating system had failed, Hannah might already be gone. He parked the rover as close to the station door as possible. The team suited up and jumped out into the cold. The wind had died down to almost nothing now. The storm was finally passing. But it was too late. They were too late. JUNHO used his security codes to override the lock. The door slid open and they rushed inside. The temperature inside the station was 50 degrees below zero. Everything was frozen. Ice covered the walls. Their breath created clouds of fog. Bora swept her medical scanner across the room. "I am getting a weak life sign," she said. "Over there." They ran toward the center of the room where someone sat against the wall, completely still, covered in frost. It was Hannah. Her lips were blue. Her skin was white. Her eyes were closed. She looked dead, but then Bora saw something move under Hannah's coat. A small bulge shifted and made a sound. Then another sound. Then several sounds all at once. Small chirping noises. Bora carefully opened Hannah's coat. 5 small Valkyrie children blinked up at the bright flashlights. They were warm. They were alive. They were perfectly healthy. Hannah had kept them alive. Somehow, with no heat and no resources, she had kept 5 alien children warm and safe while her own body froze around them. Day immediately called for the medical transport to hurry. Jinho gently lifted the Valkyrie children and placed them in a heated carrier. Minji started working on getting emergency power to the station, and Bora began the desperate work of trying to save Hannah's life. Outside, the storm finally broke. The sun appeared on the horizon for the first time in 3 days, and 2 vehicles sat in the snow outside Station 7, both carrying pieces of a family that had been torn apart but might yet be made whole again. Bora worked faster than she had ever worked before. Hannah's body temperature was dangerously low. Her heart was beating too slowly. Her breathing was shallow and irregular. Every second mattered. She wrapped Hannah in heated blankets and started in 4 with warm fluids. She attached monitors to check heart rate and oxygen levels. The numbers were bad. Very bad. Hannah was in severe hypothermia. Her body had started shutting down. They helped move Hannah onto a stretcher. She was so cold that her body felt stiff and rigid. He had never seen anyone this close to death before. But Bora did not give up. She kept working, kept adjusting the treatment, kept fighting for Hannah's life. Junho carried the heated carrier with the 5 Valkyrie children. They were awake now and chirping loudly. They seemed confused and upset by all the activity. They kept looking back toward where Hannah lay on the stretcher. The medical transport arrived and the team loaded Hannah inside. The 3 adult Valkyrie were already in the transport, lying on medical beds with their injuries bandaged. When they saw the carrier with their children, they made sounds so loud and full of emotion that everyone in the transport felt it in their chests. Junho carefully brought the carrier to the adult Valkyrie. He opened it, and the 5 children immediately jumped out and ran to their parents. The adults wrapped their long limbs around the children and pulled them close. They touched each small face and counted each small body, making sure all 5 were really there and really alive. Then one of the adult Valkyrie looked at Hannah lying unconscious on the stretcher. The alien reached out a delicate hand and gently touched Hannah's cold fingers. The translation device on the wall spoke in a flat mechanical voice, but somehow everyone could hear the deep emotion behind the words. This one saved our children. This one gave her warmth. This one is Heart Guardian now. Bora continued working on Hannah during the entire trip back to the colony hub. By the time they arrived at the hospital, Hannah's temperature had risen slightly. Her heart rate was a little stronger. She was still critical, but she was stable. She might survive. The next 3 days were difficult. Hannah remained unconscious while her body slowly warmed and healed. The doctors worked around the clock, monitoring her progress, adjusting her treatment. The damage from the hypothermia was severe. They would not know the full extent until she woke up. If she woke up, the Valkyrie family refused to leave the hospital. They stayed in a room next to Hannah's, and the children took turns sitting by her bedside. They would press their small paws against the glass window and make soft purring sounds, the same sounds they had made when they were under her coat. News of what happened spread quickly through the colony. People came to the hospital bringing flowers and messages of support. They wanted to see the woman who had sacrificed everything to save alien children she had never met before. On the 4th day, other scientists and linguists arrived to help communicate with the Valkyrie. The lead linguist was a woman named Youngmi. She had studied dozens of alien languages and was fascinated by the Valkyrie culture. Through careful translation and gesture, Youngmi learned more about what Heart Guardian meant. In Valkyrie culture, when someone risked their life to protect another's children, they became connected to that family forever. It was the highest honor their people could give. Heart Guardians were considered part of the family, sometimes even more important than blood relatives. The adult Valkyrie explained that they felt Hannah's sacrifice deeply. She had given everything to keep their children alive. She had sat still in the freezing cold, letting her own body fail so their babies could sleep peacefully. This was not just kindness. This was something beyond kindness. This was what their people called soul warmth. Youngmi shared this information with the colony leaders and with Earth Command. The story began to spread beyond just the colony. Other human settlements heard about it. Then other alien worlds heard about it. Everyone wanted to know about the human scientist who nearly died to save alien children. On the 5th day, Hannah finally opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was Bora's face smiling down at her. The second thing she saw was 5 small Valkyrie children pressed against the glass window of her room, their large eyes watching her with obvious joy. Bora checked all of Hannah's vital signs. Everything looked good? Remarkably good, considering how close she had come to death. Hannah's fingers and toes had some frostbite damage, but it would heal. Her mind was clear. Her memory was intact. She had survived? The children? Hannah's voice was rough and weak. Are they okay? Bora laughed. They are perfect. You saved them. All 5 of them are healthy because of you. Hannah closed her eyes and smiled. That was all she needed to hear. Over the next few days, as Hannah grew stronger, the Valkyrie family spent more time with her. The children would sit on her bed and purr softly. The adults would bring her special foods from their culture and tell her stories about their destroyed homeworld. They treated her with such reverence and affection that everyone in the hospital noticed. Youngmi explained that this was how Valkyrie honored their heart guardians. Hannah was now part of their family. When they eventually settled on their new homeworld, they wanted her to visit. They wanted her to be part of their lives forever, reporters from the Interstellar News Network came to interview Hannah. They asked her why she did it. Why did she risk her life for aliens she did not know? Humans and Valkyrie were not even allies. Their governments had barely any contact. What made her sacrifice so much? Hannah looked at the 5 children playing in the corner of her room. She watched them chase each other and make happy chirping sounds. Then she looked back at the reporter. They were cold, she said simply. They were children who were scared and cold and needed help. What else could I do? What else would any decent person do? The reporter's eyes filled with tears. That answer, so simple and honest, would be broadcast across 100 worlds. And people everywhere would hear it and wonder if they would have done the same thing. 3 weeks after the rescue, a delegation from the Interstellar Council arrived at the colony on Veyros 7. The council represented over 40 different alien species from across the galaxy. They had come specifically to meet Hannah and to understand what had happened. The delegation was led by an elder being called a Thoraxian. It looked like a tall insect made of crystal and spoke through a translation device. Beside it stood representatives from a dozen other worlds, all curious about the human who had nearly died for alien children. They gathered in the colony's main conference room. Hannah sat at the table, still recovering but strong enough to attend the meeting. The Valkyrie family sat beside her. The 5 children stayed close to Hannah, occasionally touching her hand or arm as if to reassure themselves she was still there. The Thoraxian spoke first. We have traveled far to meet you, Dr. Hannah Kim. Your actions have caused much discussion among the council worlds. We wish to understand your motivation. Hannah felt nervous. She was just a scientist, not a politician or diplomat. She did not know what these powerful aliens wanted from her. But she answered honestly. I found 5 children who were freezing to death. I brought them inside and kept them warm. That is all. A reptilian delegate from the Sorix collective leaned forward. But you knew this action would endanger your own life. You had limited resources. By logical calculation, you should have preserved those resources for yourself. Why did you not? Hannah looked at the 5 Valkyrie children. They looked back at her with their large, trusting eyes. She thought about how they had felt when they crawled under her coat, so small and scared and cold. Because they were children, she said. I could not let children die when I had the power to save them. It does not matter that they were a different species. It does not matter that I had never met them before. They needed help, and I could give it. That is enough. The delegates whispered among themselves in their various languages. The Thoraxian translated their discussions. Many of them found Hannah's reasoning difficult to understand. In their cultures, self-preservation was the highest priority. Sacrificing oneself for unrelated offspring from another species was not logical. It provided no evolutionary advantage. It made no strategic sense, but then an elder delegate from the Whisker species spoke up. The Whisker were ancient beings who had existed in the galaxy for thousands of years. They were known for their wisdom and philosophical thinking. I believe I understand, the Whisker said in a soft voice. Humans are paradoxical creatures. They are physically weak compared to most species. They have no natural armor, no claws, no venom. Their bodies fail in heat and cold. They are soft and vulnerable. But they possess something that makes up for all these weaknesses. They possess an impossible compassion. The Whisker moved closer to Hannah. You see, most species help their own. They protect their family, their tribe, their genetic line. This makes evolutionary sense, but humans extend that protection to strangers, to aliens, to anyone who suffers. They will break themselves before they allow innocence to come to harm. This is not logical, this is not strategic, but it is powerful. The Thoraxian made a sound that the translator said was agreement. We have studied human history. We have seen them run into burning buildings to save strangers. We have seen them jump into dangerous water to rescue drowning people they do not know. We have seen them give their food to the hungry and their shelter to the homeless even when they barely have enough for themselves. Another delegate added, and we have seen them go to war to protect people on the other side of their planet. People they will never meet. People who do not share their culture or language. They call it defending the innocent. It is a uniquely human concept. Hannah listened to all of this and felt strange. She did not think of herself as special. She had just done what felt right. But these ancient alien beings were looking at her like she represented something important about humanity. The Thoraxian stood tall. Dr. Hannah Kim, your actions have inspired the Council to make changes. We are implementing new emergency protocols for refugee transport ships. We are creating better rescue procedures for cross-species situations. We are training our people to look beyond their own kind when someone needs help. You have taught us something valuable. Hannah felt tears in her eyes. She had not expected this. She had just wanted to save 5 small lives. But apparently that simple act had created ripples that spread across the galaxy. The meeting ended with the council delegates asking to meet the Valkyrie family. The adult Valkyrie spoke about their experience and about what Hannah meant to them. They explained the concept of Heart Guardian and how Hannah would always be part of their family now. The delegates were moved by this. Several of them approached Hannah afterward and thanked her personally. They said she had shown them what true civilization looked like. Not technology or weapons or power, but simple compassion for suffering beings. Over the following months, Hannah's story became famous across the galaxy. It was studied in schools. It was discussed in philosophical debates. It became an example of what humans called humanity and what the galaxy was starting to call the human way. The Valkyrie family was eventually cleared to settle on a peaceful world called Eloria. Before they left Vero 7, they spent one last day with Hannah. The children had grown bigger and stronger. They could speak a few words of human language now. They hugged Hannah and promised to see her again. You are our warm mother, the smallest child said carefully, practicing the human words. We will never forget you. Hannah hugged them back and cried. She had saved their lives, but they had given her something equally precious. They had shown her that love and family could exist between any beings who cared for each other, regardless of where they came from. Several months after everything returned to normal, Hannah went back to her research station. It had been fully repaired and upgraded. New heating systems, better communication equipment, more emergency supplies. The colony wanted to make sure nothing like that would ever happen again. Hannah sat at her desk one evening, working on her research. The planet's long night was beginning again. Snow fell outside the window, but the station was warm and safe. She heard a soft sound at the door. When she opened it, she found a package that had been delivered by transport ship. Inside were gifts from the Valkyrie family on Eloria, handmade blankets, preserved foods from their culture, pictures the children had drawn showing Hannah with wings like an angel, and there was a message written in careful, human letters. You gave us warmth when we had none. You gave us safety when we were afraid. You gave us life when we were dying. We will carry you in our hearts forever. With love, your Valkyrie family. Hannah smiled and placed the pictures on her wall. Outside, the night grew colder and darker, but inside there was warmth and light and proof that the best thing about humanity had always been its stubborn, impossible compassion. The galaxy had learned something from a simple act of kindness on a frozen planet. And maybe, just maybe, that lesson would spread to every world and every species until compassion became not just a human trait, but a universal one.